edge-show.com.
You're listening to The Edge with Mark Thompson and Heather Ankeny.
Wait, what part of that was true? That he was in a helicopter and that's it?
And that they were stranded in the sandstorm. That was true. The part that was not true was that he was in the actual helicopter that was hit by RPG fire. He was not forced down.
And as Josh was saying, there was like 2 or 3 days in the desert. I mean, I guess there's some dispute over that. But
I've seen him tell it both ways now.
Yeah, but I mean that he certainly could be forgiven for.
But I just think I really think it's this doesn't make him a liar as far as I'm concerned. This makes him what we've already discussed. He's embellished the story and then it just became real in his head, and that's just how he told the story. And like I said, when he took it back to the record, it fell apart.
I just feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like there are a lot of people, and including me, that after a while I was like, good grief, like what's the big deal? He embellished his story in his life. Yeah, it's about what, seriously?
All right, here's where I have to get on my journalistic high horse, okay? We're not comedians, all right? We're not just the people who appear on David Letterman tell a good story. You can be that, and it's a perfectly fine thing to be. But we are journalists. The only thing that we have is our name and our credibility. If we don't tell the truth to our audience, then we're no different than Entertainment Tonight. We're no different than the National Enquirer. We're no different than Comedy Central. We're supposed to be different. It's the only reason why in this world right now where you can get information and so-called news all over the internet and anywhere, including podcasts, it's the only reason that 30 million people still tune in to the evening news. People think it's antiquated, but the evening news still draws more people than almost all the newspapers together, more than cable news by a factor of 10, because the networks have built into their anchor people and their correspondents. They've worked very hard to make sure that we are believed. So at the end of the day, if you go on and you are caught not just one time, but if you have a pattern of embellishment, that's a problem, no matter if you're Brian Williams or anybody else.
Okay.
Well, I and Aaron Sorkin would agree with you on all of those points. But I also think that, for me, Brian Williams did more to undermine that heightened position in society through his need to be a comic than he did through, over time. I think he chipped away at that revered position of network anchor more by being a clown than by being a liar.
By doing the talk show circuit, by doing the Daily Show, by doing all these things, you're saying. I do agree that, I think what we've lost the baseline in this country. We've lost the the Cronkite, right, touchstone of who do we trust and who's the model anymore. If Brian Williams isn't the model for it, if he's going to mock the white guy reading the news on TV, then...
To your point, Josh, let me just say this. Before today, I didn't think there was any problem with an anchor showing his other parts of his personality, okay? We all have different parts of our personality. But when he went over the line, this is about one guy, really, right now. I mean, you look at the other people that are still anchoring. I mean, Lester Holt. I've known Lester Holt. He worked with me at WBBM in Chicago for 10 years. He is a straight-laced. You're not going to really see him outside of the anchor thing. He's done a couple things where they appear on TV in made-for-television dramas. He's not the kind of guy who really is going to go on Letterman. He's a straightforward newsman. Scott Pelley, 60 Minutes, straight newsman. And David Muir, the guy at our place. Young guy, building his reputation, but not a comedian. So this was one guy whose part of his personality was, who else was funny like that? David Gregory. He's gone. And although he didn't do it as much, Brian had this thing that he wants to perform, and not just on the news, but elsewhere. And that got him into trouble. And not everybody else is like that. And I think yes, you're right. We've taken a huge hit. We as a business have taken a huge hit because of what Brian did, and we will work and fight to get it back through continuing to report the news in a credible fashion. That's the only thing we can do.
My question, I guess, and I don't know if you, as a friend, if you can answer this, is before this incident, was there a resentment for Brian Williams and him undermining the credibility of the network anchor?
Sure. There were some people who did not agree with that. I was not one of them. It didn't bother me to see him as Brian Williams on 30 Rock. I thought it was pretty funny. And that was a scripted show, and he wasn't embellishing anything. And I thought he was really funny on Letterman and The Tonight Show. I guess and I only knew about this afterwards, when I heard that he actually wanted to do The Tonight Show instead of doing the news.
Yeah, that was a crazy
kind of
fact.
concerned me a little bit,
Yeah.
about who you really are. But I have to say that up until this incident, Brian has been one of the most respected people in the business. And he is, until this happened, pretty well liked. Not even pretty well. I would say overwhelmingly liked in the halls of NBC and of other places. And a stand-up type of guy. When Diane Sawyer left the World News, Brian Williams did a piece about it. He is one of those guys who is giving and generous. And this is a real disappointment, I'm sure, to him and to all of us.
One of the things that they were looking at, there's a truth squad at NBC now looking into all of these things. This is Brian talking about Katrina. Katrina was the thing that really broke him big. He was down there. This is him in an interview talking about what he saw in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina.
It's funny. Here we are remembering the loss of our colleague, Ed Bradley. Ed just handed me an Emmy for our work in Katrina. Just weeks ago, handed me the Emmy that I accepted for my colleagues.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, stop right there. It's like he wraps himself. It's him. This is a character flaw, it would almost seem. I'm sorry, with all due respect. Look, this is an amazing, accomplished guy.
And this is the problem, Mark, is now that anything he says, so if he comes back, now all these things that we heard him say before, we have a new perspective on them, right? You hear him talk about Ed Bradley, and you're thinking, there he is again, putting himself in the middle of the story. He's the Forrest Gump of news.
I would have rolled my eyes without the lie, too.
Yes, me too. But Jim's right. It amplifies the eye roll. It totally
does, for
sure. It amplifies the eye roll, for sure. Because I agree. I would have gone, geez, dude, really? You have to say, he says 3 times, he says, gave us the Emmy.
Just gave me the Emmy. It's still warm in my hand.
Now, anything he reports on in the future, that's the issue he's got. Right. Anytime he's involved in the story, it's tough.
I'd still take him over Jimmy Fallon, so it's not too late.
You would?
Emmy for our work in Katrina. Just weeks ago, handed me the Emmy that I accepted for my colleagues. And when I was down there, I used to be a volunteer firefighter in New Jersey. I was wearing the boots that I've owned since 1976. I had them pulled up as waiters. When you look out of your hotel room window in the French Quarter and watch a man float by face down, when you see bodies that you last saw in Banda Aceh, Indonesia, and swore to yourself that you would never see in your country.
That floated a long way.
I beat that storm. I was there before it arrived. I wrote it out with people who later died in the Superdome.
Did you know in the back of your mind that when you wanted to get out, you could get out? But those people in there, they could not get out.
That's exactly what happened. We closed the doors behind us. They allowed our camera crew out because I had to anchor nightly news that Monday night, and I looked back on that dome. Those people hadn't been told anything. They hadn't been given anything, no announcements. They weren't somehow good enough.
They weren't anchoring
and
nightly news like I was.
Isn't that maybe the caption on Katrina? They weren't somehow good enough.
And you know what? He's actually making a really good point. It's a shame that it's lost in what is some self-aggrandizement along the way.
But that body didn't really float by him in New Orleans.
That was the point I was making, which is that they're looking into this now.
Yeah.
Well, I think they've already found. NBC News already said, and I know this guy, Richard Esposito, who is the head of their investigatives unit, used to work at ABC and is a hard-nosed newsman who worked at the Post and the Daily News in New York City.
He's heading up their investigative unit on this.
No, he's going to be straight. He isn't impressed by anybody. And what he found, according to what NBC News said, was that Brian was found to have embellished both outside his newscast and inside his newscast on other events. And that's what led to the 6 months suspension. He could have probably weathered and pressed on, and because he's so popular, maybe he would have weathered it.
Right.
But I think I told you early on, Mark, that if there were other things, that he was in trouble, and that's really what happened. And it's the Katrina story. There's a couple, there are a couple problems with the Katrina story, and this goes to your point about anchor people. And this is more of a broader statement. Is that if he saw a body going through the French Quarter, the French Quarter was not flooded. So he may have just gotten the place where he was wrong when he saw that. Okay. But he also talked about how he was in danger at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, but by gangs of thugs who were coming around and harassing people there. That turned out to be not true. The Ritz-Carlton came out and said, hey, our people were totally safe. We had guards. And he also talked about being in danger in the Superdome and in the dark hallways of the Superdome. So my point has been that's almost impossible because an anchor person does not travel alone. They travel with producers, they travel with camera crews at all times, and frequently they travel with security guards. Diane Sawyer was so harassed by onlookers and stalkers that from the door of ABC in New York, 6 feet to her car where they took her home, there was a security guard who walked her that 6 feet. They do not, they're not hanging out in, they're not letting their huge investments that they're making $10 million and $16 million a year hang out in stairwells in the dark by themselves.
Get more of The Edge on Stitcher and iTunes, or go to our website, edge-show.com.